Good evening, everyone. My name is Councilwoman Sherelle Parker. I have the great honor and distinction of representing Philadelphia's 9th Councilmatic District. I want to thank you for joining me and my colleagues for our Biden Town Hall virtual after party. I am excited to share this virtual stage with my dynamic colleagues, and we are going to discuss the positions that our presidential nominee shared tonight and how the Biden-Harris agenda will impact our city. I'm also honored to introduce Sarita Martin, the host of Save Space with Sincerely Sarita on WURD Radio. Sarita has blazed her own trail as a journalist and multimedia professional in our city. Now, just for the record, although she is originally from Pittsburgh, Sister Sarita, we claim you as our own, for you're a Philly sister. Sarita has worked tirelessly to ensure that Black people, specifically Black women, and she's been unapologetic about it, have the platform to tell their own stories, and we thank you for that. Take it away, Sister Sarita.
Oh my gosh, what an intro. Thank you. So much, Councilwoman Parker. It's an honor to serve as moderator for such an important conversation that is truly being held during a historic moment in our country's history. In just a moment, I'll welcome our esteemed guest here with us for this virtual after party, and then share a bit about how things will flow from here. All right. So just giving us the rundown, right? So let's meet our folks. Joining us, we have Councilwoman at Large, Catherine Gilmore Richardson, Council Member at Large, Kendra Brooks, and 3rd District Council Member, Jamie Gaudier. Good evening, Council members, and thank you for your time and for joining us. How are you all doing?
Good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So speaking of time, let's not waste any. I think for all of you loves who are tuning in, you may find that there's more structure and respect of time here than what we've seen in some of the 2020 presidential debates. So here's how it's going to flow. There will be 3 questions that the council members will be presented with. Each will be given 2 minutes to share their response. From there, we'll take 3 questions from you all, the viewers, and each council member will be given 1 minute to provide their response. We'll then hear closing remarks from myself and each council member, and then Councilwoman Parker will deliver the final remarks. And so I just want to say we're appreciative to you for joining us, for staying up, for tuning into the Biden Town Hall virtual after party. And with that said, I think we can go ahead and jump right in to the first question. And I will say this was really tied to just what I saw and what I'm understanding as a freelance journalist. The town halls held today, right, forced the American people to essentially pick or flip, right? Like pick a channel and a candidate or flip back and forth between the two. When thinking about the value of a vote and our view, based on what you witnessed, did Biden make Americans' decision to tune in worth it? And if so, how?
Well, let me just start by stating that I think Vice President Biden was very presidential today. When you heard him mention, for the record, specifically in response to the gentleman who talked about the LGBT community being very concerned that rights would be taken away via the courts or just via the Trump administration as a whole. When you heard the transgender question that came up in the end, when you heard the first question about COVID, and Vice President Biden said, wait a minute, we have to follow a national standard. We should, and we should use our presidential platform to do such. I think he was presidential, and I think he set a clear distinction today between he, along with the gentleman who is occupying that house on Pennsylvania Avenue currently.
I would have to agree. I feel like when I watch Biden speak, he offers a sense of comfort. He feels familiar and presidential, as the majority leader said. I also think that unlike, the current occupant of the White House, Biden was able to speak to people with a variety of different views and to answer their questions intelligently and not to divide us. Right? The people featured in the town hall were very different. We had folks from the suburbs who were white. I was struck by the question from the young Black gentleman, Cedric. But I thought that with each question, regardless of where the person fell on the spectrum, the vice president or the former vice president was able to address their concerns. And that's exactly what we need in a president. And it will also be really important for, whomever wins, but hopefully it's Biden. It will be really important for the next president to have the ability to bring us all together, right? After this election, we all have to come together and restore civility back to our country. And he showed his ability to do that tonight.
And I would have to agree with my colleagues, Sarita, that it was very refreshing to listen to former Vice President Biden talk about how he would restore decency to the office of presidency of the United States of America. It was refreshing to hear him talk to individuals who may not agree with him and who voted for the current occupant of the White House and be able to respond to their questions, with thoughtful answers and responses. And I too was struck by the question from the young man, Cedric, who happens to be my sorority sister's son. And he's a student at the University of Pittsburgh. And I was struck by the fact that he asked Vice President Biden about how he can earn the vote of young African Americans who we know will be crucial in this upcoming election. For me, I was impressed by the vice president's response to the COVID-19 question, because we know that here in Philadelphia, that our citizens have been adversely impacted across the city by COVID-19, but especially Black and brown communities in our city. And to hear him talk about how he would have a national response, and I was very impressed when he talked about local council members. He said he would talk to governors, he would talk to the mayor, he would talk to local council members about why it's important to have a national response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's still important because we still don't have a national response around testing and contact tracing and the importance of wearing masks and the importance of hand washing, good hand washing, hygiene, and all that we need to do to ensure that we can keep people safe. So I was impressed by the responses, by his thoughtfulness, by his decency, and I'm just very happy that Vice President Biden had the opportunity to speak directly to voters this evening.
All right, let me tell y'all on the timing, y'all getting it, And next.
Yeah, I just want to add that, I was really impressed and really good to be able to hear his policy, based on the other debate, on the debate platform. We didn't have a chance to hear him really express his views on the policies. So that was really refreshing. And also for him to be transparent enough to admit the flaws with the crime bill, and for him to admit that publicly, that showed and gave us like some real level of respect for him and his views, and the fact that even if we don't 100% agree with everything, we're able to move him on issues that we may not, 100% agree on. So for me, that was a win.
Got you. Appreciate each of you. And it has to be pure alignment. Because I was going to ask about Cedric Humphrey, who is a young Black student. He asked Biden, I want to make sure folks know that question. And I'm going to quote him here. He said, "So my question for you then is, besides, quote, you ain't Black, what do you have to say to young Black voters who see voting for you as further participation in a system that continually fails to protect them?" And so, council members, we can keep in the same order. But what are your thoughts on Biden's response, and did it suffice in your opinion?
So one, I was thoroughly excited to hear him take it head on. He was unapologetic in his response in noting the generational wealth gap. He went from the power of early childhood education to the importance of investing in historically Black colleges and universities to give people access to the educational opportunity, right? So that they can be self-sufficient and have a career that allows them to take care of themselves. And so he says to Cedric, also, let's also talk about building wealth. And with all due respect, I was extremely happy to hear him say that, because I am so sick and tired of hearing people say Black Lives Matter when we're talking about, misuse of police power and police abuse. But when we start talking about access to economic opportunity, all of a sudden Black lives don't matter that much. But he talked about those disparities and opportunities when he talked about buying a house, a white person buying a house in one place, and then a Black person buying a house, not far. The difference in the prices, who is able to get approved for a loan. He mentioned redlining. All of these things that national figures sometimes sort of whisper about, or they want to say in a small group that's predominantly Black or African American when they're talking to that particular constituency. But today he acknowledged it for everyone, and he owned it, and he said it. And to me, that was extremely important. In addition to that, while I'm listening to him, I'm thinking about the Lift Every Voice plan. That's the Biden-Harris plan for the Black community. And I'm thinking about all of the people who said, Sherelle, I'm frustrated. I'm not excited about this. Government hasn't been responsive. I want everyone who feels that way to tell me what they feel after they've had a chance to read the plan, so that they can make an informed decision.
All right. And next, in the same order.
I want to start by saying just how brilliant a question that was. I think since 2016, Black people, particularly young Black people, have watched Democrats chase white working class voters as if, they're gold or something, right? And without an acknowledgement that even if Black voters don't go and vote Republican, they might not vote. If you cannot get them excited, and if you cannot prove to them that you deserve their vote, they might stay home, right? And so I think his way of characterizing what swing voter looks like for a Black person, and therefore the Democrats' responsibility to speak to young Black people, was critically important. That being said, I actually wanted to hear Vice President Biden hit that question a little stronger. I think he said all the right things. He talked about early childhood education, and he talked about more resources in schools and investing in college and in HBCUs in particular, and home buying. But, it was very kind of rambly. And when he got to the end, they asked Cedric, did he cover the question? And Cedric was like, I think so. And I took that as, I guess, right? That, to me, that's how that was translated. And I think young people want to feel that you can feel their experience. And I think young people want you to speak to what it feels like to exist as a young Black person in this country, right? So we don't necessarily want you to talk about how your plan will allow, Black kids to overcome, shortcomings in their learning in the past. And we don't want you to necessarily talk about how Black entrepreneurs are as just as good as white entrepreneurs if they're given a chance. We want you to talk about racism, right? And we want you to hit that head on, and we want you to talk about justice. And so he said all the right things, but I wanted to hear him say it more succinctly and more passionately, and really own that moment to speak to a young, brilliant man like Cedric.
All right.
So I too agree with my colleagues that Cedric's question was on point, particularly for young African American males that we have been talking to across our city. They want to know that we will finally change the systems that are in place that have kept them behind for far too long. But one thing I heard from Vice President Biden is something that I heard from one of my favorite urban American philosophers, Jay-Z, that generational wealth, that's the key. It's generational wealth, and how we are going to look at these racist and equitable policies that really prevent Black people from having a fair shot. I think that's what he was asking. And I will tell you, I've still been watching the town hall on my television while we've been on this forum, that Vice President Biden committed to staying and speaking with some of these attendees even after the camera stopped rolling. And I have seen him do that to try to further address these questions. But I think it's important to note that in the Biden plan for Black America, it talks extensively about, how we will work to advance the economic mobility of African Americans and work to really close those racial wealth and income gaps that we've seen. And similar to what Vice President Biden talked about, ensuring that we have high quality education and really tackle, the racial inequities in our education system, which is something that we have here in Philadelphia with the PHL pre-K program, because we know it's important to provide that access to young people, because from grades K to 3, you're learning to read, and after that you're reading to learn. But talking about making those far-reaching investments in ending health disparities by race, and really renewing and ensuring that America has a commitment to justice for Black people. And really what I wanted to hear him say as well is that we have a problem in this country with white supremacy. And that's something that we have to address in all of our policies that we're looking at, not only here in the city of Philadelphia, but across our country. But I was impressed by the response, and I'm even more impressed by the plan that Biden has for Black America.
Gotcha. Yep, Councilmember.
Yes, I would have loved to see a bolder stance on the agenda for Black people, especially young people. I think I'm speaking from being a mother of millennials. I have a 29-year-old and a 21-year-old. And I think about my kids and like what they deserve and what they hope for. And I would have loved to hear him kind of spell out and speak directly to Cedric and young Black folks that I know and their issues. And, he spoke about being an entrepreneur. He talked about access to education and all these things. But, our young people need to be guaranteed employment. They need to be guaranteed affordable housing. And none of what he said offered a guarantee. It was things that we know because of racist policies that we've had in the past exist. So I heard him, but I want to agree with Councilmember Gautier. Like Cedric's answer was like, yeah, whatever. And that's the first thing I heard, because as a mother of young adults, I've heard that, yeah, whatever before. And I would have loved for him to like speak really to Cedric. And I really do hope he follows up with Cedric to really hear the voice of young Black people in our community. And here Cedric says, I need more. I need more for myself, and I need more for my peers.
As a mother, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was like, oh wait, I've heard that response before. That you got to follow up on that. So I agree. I do hope there is some follow up. I do want to take a second, because we are killing time. I just want y'all to know, just snaps all around the board. So with that, I want to take a moment to remind everyone who's tuning in, if you haven't already, please go ahead and share this, start a watch party, tag your folks in the comments. But something else that you can also do in the comments is submit questions, right? Because we have one more question that I'll be asking. But then after that, it's all on y'all, right? And so if we can get your questions in now, I can make sure we'll do our best to get to it. We're only doing 3. And I mean, I think it's only going to be 3. I don't know. If we keep going on time the way we are, might be able to get in, squeeze in an extra one. But I do want to take a moment to just acknowledge some of the folks who are tuned in. Shout out to Carol, Tanyelle, Denise. Who else? We have Ernie, Monica, Joyce, Corinne. Like, I would so appreciate y'all being here with us. I see. Okay. This is so good. Yes, it is. Great responses. Love the authenticity. I don't think the plans are flushed out enough for Black America. That's what Casey said. And so we do appreciate this engagement that you're giving us in the comments. Russell said, where are we review the Lift Every Voice plan, would like to hear more. Okay, so I think what Russell was asking, where can we review the Lift Every Voice plan, would like to hear more. And I'll tell you what, Russell, one thing I'll do, or maybe our team can do, is drop the direct link in the comment section for everyone so that you all can access it right there. Let's see, Lene said, Temple University Allied Health Professionals Chair of Political and Community Engagement is here giving support. Thank you for this venue. For union members, do you think Biden would? Oh, okay. So we're going to save this question. Let's add that to our open forum. And yeah, I see some questions coming in. Okay. So appreciate y'all. Yes, get engaged, ask your questions. Now, let's get back to business here with my final question. Taxing of big corporations and the wealthy were also addressed. Mm-hmm. What did you take away from Biden's response about his plan? And what would it mean for Philadelphians, especially when there are already concerns around property taxes and the 10-year abatement here?
So that was a really great question for me. And it put in the context a very popular term that we often hear people talk about. It's pretty sexy, but they don't actually describe it. You will often hear people say, we wish Pennsylvania had a much more progressive tax structure. That means the more you earn, the more you pay. The less you earn, the less you will pay. But we know in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we have something that is called the Uniformity Clause. And that means we have a tax rate across the board, and it is applied equally no matter what your income is. So if we wanted to make our state tax structure more progressive, we have to make that change at the state level. For the vice president to say, listen, this is what we're going to do at the federal level, and those who are in that top 1% are going to have to pay more. And he talked about reducing a rate for those. You remember he mentioned $400,000 as being sort of the dollar amount. And when he says that would come down, I'm thinking to myself, you mean for the first time in our nation, we would see our tax structure in the United States become more progressive? That was extremely important to me. But Sarita, I've got to add something else here. Do I think he's going to make the Fortune 500s pay more? Yes, I think that was one of the best questions he answered, because he demonstrated the difference between Trump's tax cuts and those that he would eliminate. So I think he was really clear. I want to go back to that question from Cedric. The issue is Black people have achieved access to social, economic, and racial justice as close in all of the strides that we've made. We've got there using 3 very primary sources. We've got there using nonviolent social protests. We've got there using the courts, the value of that Supreme Court, the precedent setting rulings that came out, Brown v. Board of Education. We know Roe v. Wade. We know how important the court is, but we've also used the ballot. So how many times we're so used to, in this environment, at the local level and at the state level, watching people attempt to bar us from accessing our opportunity to vote. For Vice President Biden, yes, he's a candidate. Yes, he's running. But for him to look Cedric in the face to say, your power is in that right to vote. when you go and cast that vote, no matter who it's for, you are exercising that power. Let me tell you something. We're in Philadelphia and we think it's the norm, but there are a whole lot of people who live in communities that don't look like ours, that did not like, I guarantee you, seeing that white, powerful man, vice president, who could potentially become the next president of the United States, telling that young black man that you have power and access to equity using one of those most powerful tools. So I wanted to state that for the record. That's what many people have been trying to take it away from.
No, appreciate that. And let's keep that order and flow going.
I appreciate a lot of things about the Biden tax plan. One of the main things that I appreciate about it is that it would reverse a lot of the Trump tax plan. Trump clearly is the president for the wealthy, right? He came in with an agenda to help himself and his wealthy friends, and his tax plan backed that up. And so I'm glad that Biden would raise taxes on uber wealthy individuals and on corporations so that our country and the families who live in this country have support, for the things we need. I also like that the tax plan includes a higher dependent care tax credit, which is very useful for working families. I like that the plan has a higher credit for student debt and also allows for more incentives for home ownership. I think those are all really good things. I was a little puzzled by the firmness or the commitment not to raise taxes on anyone over $400,000 a year. I mean, $400K is quite a lot of income. Not many people in Philadelphia make that level of income. So I was confused as to why we landed there in terms of whose taxes would get raised and who wouldn't. But overall, I appreciate the plan.
I have to agree with my colleagues on this one, particularly around how Vice President Biden spoke to the elimination of the Trump tax cuts. And I think it's important to note that while the civil engineer who asked the question, Anthony, stated that right now he thought the tax cuts were good, and that may be the case the first and second year of the plan. A few years down the line, you're going to be paying much more, and you won't see that savings any longer in your paycheck. But also when Vice President Biden talked about extending tax cuts for the middle class and protecting those who are in the middle. That is vitally important, particularly for a city like Philadelphia, where we are seeing a shrinking of the middle class, and similar to what our majority leader talks about all the time, those neighborhoods who are on the cusp and on the line of either doing good or reversing. So I think that was important. Also, where he talked about raising the corporate tax back to 28%. And for me, one of the most important things that he mentioned was the Moody analysis of the Biden tax economic plan that talked about creating 18.6 million new jobs. And I think that's important as we look to how we will recover from the coronavirus, not only in our city, but across the country, the creation of jobs, but most importantly, family supporting and sustaining jobs will be important to the recovery that we see here in our city, particularly because our city budget relies heavily on contributions of the wage tax. So the creation of jobs will be important to our city. So I appreciated that part of the plan. Also, I was thankful that Vice President Biden mentioned the shape of the recovery, because we're hearing so much from the Trump administration that it will be a kind of a V-shaped recovery, and really it'll be a K-shaped recovery, because we have 4 crises happening all at once. And that's something that we need to think about as we talk about our plans to recover. So I appreciated that question. I also appreciated how Vice President Biden had his cue card with the numbers to make sure he got the numbers right when he was responding to that question. Yes. So thank you for that question. That's important.
Yeah, council member, I also was impressed with the cue card. A man after my own heart, and I don't say that often. One thing, I was really excited to hear him talk about taxing corporations, and that's something that we've been talking about for years. People have been pushing for taxing the rich. And like Councilmember Gautier said, we know that it's going to be really hard to kind of undo some of what Trump has done. And we know we're going to still have to hold him to his feet to make sure all of this gets done, because we know that moving into recovery after COVID, taxing the rich people is going to be necessary. Taxing rich institutions is going to be necessary. And, you know, I'm glad that's part of his plan, but I know that we're going to have to continue to hold him to the fire to get it done.
You know, it's interesting that you brought that up in particular, or use that language of accountability and holding them to the fire, because we actually had a question that came in around that. And so I'll get to that in just a second, but a couple of things, just a couple orders of business. First and foremost, if you are tuned in and joining us for the Biden Town Hall virtual after party, please make sure you start a watch party or share this. Okay, flood all these internet streets so folks see all these Black women right here talking and debriefing about what we just witnessed and experienced. Also, feel free to drop a question, your question, in the comment section so that we can consider that and see if we can include it as one of the 3, possibly 4, that we'll be looking to get to in just a moment. And again, we appreciate and thank you all for rocking with us, spending your evening with us. That doesn't go unnoticed, right? So now, with that said, let's get to this first question. And it ties to accountability and holding folks' feet to the fire. Jimmy asked, what are you all prepared to do as council members, regardless of what candidate wins the presidency? What are your non-negotiable policy-wise, and how do you intend to accomplish them?
Jimmy, and I want the listening audience to know, I don't know Jimmy, and I did not pay him. I did not pay him to ask that question, but thank you so very much, because I love it. What I'm committed to do is continue what I've been doing my entire career, and that is the work to close the gap between the haves and the have-nots. The one thing that you had to appreciate when the vice president was answering the question about bipartisanship and how do you get things done, this is when how legislative bodies work becomes very important. We're in city council. There are 2 very important numbers. The first number is 9 and the second number is 12. Anything that I'm committed to getting done here in the city of Philadelphia, I have to go and earn the vote of my colleagues. And I want to do that by presenting a data-driven, research-based methodology about why what I am presenting, I believe, is in the best interest of our constituency. And so when we talk about home ownership, rental assistance, for example, is something that is extremely important, and it has really been highlighted in the midst of this pandemic when we look at how many people are housing insecure. But you know what I haven't heard a lot of people saying? I haven't heard a lot of people saying that although Philadelphia is the poorest big city in the nation, one of the things, no matter what problems we've had over the years, we've always been able to say is that we have a high rate of home ownership. That's the way Black people in Philadelphia made it into the working and the middle class. Guess what? The scales are almost equal now. The amount of home ownership versus those who are renting. Guess what? Not satisfied with it. Want to make sure that people have the ability to stay in their house, but I don't want people pushing poverty pimping sort of solutions that will keep you living in a substandard manner and not giving you access to own. So if you don't help me get access to the opportunity so that I can have self-sufficiency, there's a problem with that. Sherelle, what do you mean? When we talk about job creation, I will not allow anybody to put me in a box. Sherelle, you're for the people, right? I'm for the people, and I want jobs for folks, but I don't think that if I'm going to be pro-worker, that necessarily means that I have to be anti-employer. It's not an either or. I want employers to survive and thrive and grow because I want people to have access to jobs. So I want self-sufficiency. I want home ownership. I want clean neighborhoods. I want dignity. I want quality schools. And guess what? I can talk about all of those things that I'm interested in seeing, but guess what? Everything that I offered has a price tag, and you got to pay for it, right?
Gotcha.
So if you're going to offer it, Sherelle, how you're going to pay for it, and who's going to pay the bill. And that's what I think that we have to do, and I'm committed to that. Closing the gap.
All right, we got time.
No matter who's in the White House.
All right, up next.
I am committed to fighting for equity and justice for those who get the short end of the stick. And in this city is Black and brown people, no matter who wins the presidency. Mm-hmm. It's been striking to me to see how since the pandemic, Black and brown folks have suffered disproportionately, not only from COVID, and I represent the 3rd district, and we have zip codes where we've had the highest amount of hospitalizations. And at the same time that we have world-class hospitals within our boundaries, our folks have suffered the most, right? In addition to COVID, Black folks have suffered the most from the recession. And now the neighborhoods that I represent are suffering the most, or suffering among the most in the city from gun violence. And so what all this has shown me is that we have to have policies that center the people who are hurting the most. And I am prepared to fight for those policies regardless of who's in the White House. And so on my agenda, I think I'm over time, but just quickly, on my agenda, I fight a lot for housing justice. I represent neighborhoods that are gentrifying, and Black folks are getting displaced from my neighborhoods. And so I'm pushing for developers to have to build affordable housing as they continue to build, so that everyone can afford to live in amenity-rich neighborhoods. I'm pushing for more support for renters who are struggling the most and who are most vulnerable to the changes that have been happening in our market. I'm pushing for fair working conditions, for good wages and benefits for the workers in our neighborhoods who need that. I'm pushing for institutions to do more contracting with minority-owned and women-owned and locally owned businesses. And I'm pushing for more and different types of resources to go towards this gun violence epidemic. I think beyond, just locking folks up, we have to have an answer for the trauma that is being felt right now in our neighborhoods. We have to have an answer for young people who need another option. And we have to put that at the top of our priority list. And so those are my priorities, regardless of who wins. It just, if Biden doesn't win, it just means we're fighting harder. But even if he wins, we're pushing him for what we need.
All right. And next.
So I think it's important, no matter who wins the White House, that we focus on your zip code not determining your life expectancy in the city of Philadelphia. And that's what I'm going to focus on in every aspect of my work. And the first thing that I've been focusing on is workforce development. The first bill that I introduced in council was around ensuring that we work to create preferences for our young people who are graduating from the Philadelphia public school system, who can vie for employment with the city of Philadelphia. Look at how we are focusing on curriculum realignment in our city to ensure that we are preparing our young people for the jobs that will be in the city of Philadelphia. Looking at our labor market indicators to say, when these young people graduate, what jobs will be here and how are we preparing them for those opportunities? So really keenly focusing on workforce development as an opportunity to get not only young people, but everyone in our city the opportunity to reskill and to upskill so they can move into family supporting and sustaining job opportunities that will sustain them in Philadelphia. Also focusing on how we can work within the confines of our education system to ensure that we have conflict resolution in all of our schools for young people, because we understand that with this gun violence epidemic that we've been seeing in Philadelphia, that our young people and folks who grow up and move on and out into the system don't have the skills to resolve conflicts without, picking up a weapon. So I think that's something we need to focus on. Also, transparency and accountability in government for the people that we serve. And that's something that I've been focusing on around police reform, working with the Police Reform Working Group, ensuring that we can have a public comment session before we go into negotiations with the Fraternal Order of Police. And I'm sure that most of you have seen this week that a lawsuit was filed against the city trying to stop us from having transparency and accountability in city government, but the work continues. And lastly, thank you, but lastly, I want to say one more thing. It's important that we focus on climate change here in the city of Philadelphia. And I am impressed by Vice President Biden's plan for a clean energy revolution and environmental justice in our city, because as we've seen recently with the floods in Eastwick and some of the other climate events that have happened, but also the urban heat island impacts that we see across communities, how, you know, our lower income communities, their temperatures are much higher than some of our other communities. Again, your zip code determining your life expectancy. We need to have a keen focus on how we will look at climate change to ensure that we are protecting our city for the future. And I want to mention this because this is something that continues to come up in all the debates. You know, American people want climate action. And as a part of Vice President Biden's plan, he has notated that the Green New Deal is a crucial framework as a part of that plan. So I think there's openness there for him to address some of the issues that have been notated in the Green New Deal. And I'm impressed by, you know, how many jobs it will create. So I think we need to focus on the environment, a clean energy future, and environmental justice as well. So those are the things I'm going to be focused on, no matter who's in the White House, because we know that all politics are local. And what happens here in Philadelphia matters. And that's the reason why we have been sworn in and elected to represent the people of Philadelphia, to represent their issues and the things that matter to them most.
Gotcha. Last but not least.
All right. So for me, 2016 triggered me to be here now. So I knew that going into this, we need to make sure that we're fighting for working people, like working people in general. So what I plan to do is continue that fight for working people. And my agenda has included affordable housing, ending homelessness, getting the rich to pay their fair share, quality schools, and stopping violence. And when I think of violence, I'm talking about violence by the neighbor or violence by the police. Either way, it's something that has been threatening our communities. A Green New Deal with no fracking, though. For Philly, you know, and you know, regardless of what happens on November 3rd, even though it deeply matters, the main thing, we need to make sure our people are going to the polls. We need to make sure people are voting early, voting by mail, vote in person, because November 3rd counts. And what we do, it makes a difference on what we're going to see for the next 4 years. And I'm just committed right now to getting this racist rapist out of the office, but also to make sure that we're fighting for the resources that we need in our city. Councilmember Parker talking about getting the money to make sure that these things we have are available so our communities can have the neighborhoods that we deserve. And that is my commitment.
Got you. I appreciate all of you. And we're coming up on time. I want to try to get one more question in, because I know we also have to get each of your closing remarks. So there was a mention of hospitals and hospitalizations. Lene asked, for union members, do you think Biden would help fight to save the hospitals in our area? Corporations are trying to weaken our hospitals and decrease the care in our city.
Definitely. I think that he has proven that. I mean, particularly when it comes to organized labor, working families and working people. And Councilwoman Brooks just mentioned that if you have never in your life thought that a union was important and union protection for workers was important, you know it now as you watch what has happened to workers in the midst of COVID, in the midst of the social and civil unrest that we've seen in our nation. It has decimated certain industries, the hospitality industry, many of our essential workers. I'm thinking about Councilwoman Brooks. She's from 1199C. We were down at Temple not long ago, right? helping to, advocate for workers so they get access to hazard pay and those who are working, in the prisons. So definitely. And one of the first ways I think he would do that, and I think our hospitals would suffer, and the workers, is listen, if that Supreme Court just immediately wipes away the Affordable Care Act. That's the first way, our hospitals will be destroyed. But in funding Medicare and the Affordable Care Act, I think undoubtedly, and listen, the great thing I like about this is that he has a track record for supporting working men and women, particularly organized labor. And I'm not simply just talking about the building trades. I'm talking about the Unite Here's of the world. I'm talking about the AFSCMEs, the 1199s. Joe Biden has been an elected official, a servant who has advocated for working people all of his life. So nobody has ever questioned that on his record. I quickly want to add in here, Sarita, and both Councilwoman Brooks and Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson made me think about it when they mentioned the Green New Deal. And when Councilwoman Brooks said the most important thing right now is for us to encourage our people to vote. Have you noticed that even in this town meeting and even in the last debate, Trump, along with the moderator here, George, they tried to stoke the Green New Deal because that's an effort. That's a very strategic divide and conquer effort, right, within the Democratic Party. Let me pit those who I'm considering to be left or over here, in the middle that's over here. Then we have some conservative Democrats who are over here. I said, oh Lord, that's a divide and conquer strategy that we know in the Black community. They've done that to us for a real long time. So I would just ask people to make sure that they kept that in mind, and definitely he'll support workers and hospitals.
Gotcha. Councilman?
I do believe that Biden would support our hospitals and stop this corporate takeover that we're seeing. I think Biden genuinely cares about workers. And I think he genuinely cares about working families having access to quality healthcare. And his policies show that, right? He wants to offer a public option. He wants to expand healthcare access for low-income Americans. His tax plan includes a high level of support for families to get healthcare. And he also talks about using antitrust laws to stop, the corporate merger across the hospital system. So I think he's very genuine when he speaks about all that, and I think it shows up in his policy platform.
I too have to agree with my colleagues on that one, because I think Vice President Biden deeply cares about the healthcare system, not only from a policy perspective around protecting the Affordable Care Act, but he also cares from the perspective of a father, someone who went through with his son who was suffering from cancer. He can speak to this issue with a sense of empathy and sympathy that not a lot of us can. And I think that he really is committed to the healthcare system because of that. I know that in his plan, he wants to build on the Affordable Care Act by giving Americans more choices and really focusing on investing in our healthcare systems. So Vice President Biden does have a plan, and he wants to support our hospital systems and ensure that we have the resources necessary to do the work we need to do. But also from the perspective as a former healthcare worker, because I was a unit secretary on the orthopedics and neurosurgery floor at the nation's first hospital, and also served as a staffing coordinator for the nursing and non-nursing units, where we created the first transitional work program to ensure that we can have individuals going from, like home health aid positions onto a certified nursing assistants or patient care techs or phlebotomists, and able to move into those more family supporting and sustaining jobs. I know that Vice President Biden supports workers and looks at the support of the healthcare system as an opportunity to continue to support working families. So I'm encouraged by his plan, his support, and protection of the Affordable Care Act, and I look forward to continuing to read more about his healthcare plan.
Okay. Councilman?
Yes. So we know that strong unions make hospitals stronger. And I do believe that Biden is truly a pro-union president. He knows the power of working people, and I do think that his commitment is genuine. Here in Philadelphia this summer, we saw how venture capitalists just came and took one of our hospitals, Hahnemann. And that's the place, like that type of corporate takeovers is where we're going to need his support and push, not just locally, but on a national level. We've seen hospitals taken over across our state. And I do believe that he'll stand up and fight for healthcare and make sure that our workers and our unions continue to stay strong.
Yeah.
Sarita, I'm sorry to interrupt, but one thing I quickly wanted to mention is that I think we have to think about that there will be a dearth of resources, in our city governments and in our state governments because of COVID-19 and the lack of revenue collection that we're seeing right now as a result of the stay-at-home orders. And I know that we will need significant financial support from the federal government in order to ensure we have the resources necessary to provide the quality service that our constituents deserve. So I know that Vice President Biden will be working with states and municipalities to ensure that we receive the funding we need to provide that quality service. And I think that's important to mention because some of that funding goes to hospital systems and healthcare systems. And we will need that support because our revenue collection is down as a result of COVID and as a result of our, restaurants and businesses being closed. We will need the federal government support in cities and in states across the country to ensure we can provide that quality service. So I just wanted to throw that in there because that will be very important to us moving forward.
I mean, if I could just chime in super quickly, I think that's a great point. And just also wanted to say, Biden is a president who knows the importance of cities. Our current president has put himself at war with American cities. I've never seen anything like that. He, in particular, he's put himself at war with cities that are majority color. Biden believes in cities and wants to invest in them. And I think that's a change we would see if he were to make his way into the White House.
Got you. So I want to try to get one more question in here. Kiwana McKinney, she said, female breadwinners help maintain families and communities' standard of living. What would you say to a female breadwinner to ensure she encourages others to vote?
I would go back to our history, and this is extremely important. When we look at all of the gains that have been made in this nation, I don't care if we're talking about women, if we're talking about the Black community, we've used 3 vehicles. And one of the vehicles has been our power to vote. And that is to elect people who we hold accountable to deliver policy initiatives that will help to improve our quality of life. We also should just note for the record that when we talk about politics, and this is important, we talked about that revenue that we needed from the federal government. But what did Vice President Biden say tonight to let you know that he really understood what it meant to be a member of the legislative body? In order to get anything done, he knows he's going to need the Senate and need the Congress. So he didn't put himself into a box. You didn't hear him have to go so far to prove that he was a good Democrat that he said, I'll never talk. I'm such a purist. I'm such a purist Democrat that I'll never be willing to go and approach a Republican if I need the votes to come, for example, help Philadelphia close this $750 million budget gap we just had to close because of the revenue we lost as a result of COVID this past budget cycle. And so I would argue that we have to talk about our interests and we have to talk about the economic interests. That is extremely important. That wealth. Sometimes we let people off the hook very easily when we start talking about some social issues. But if we want to attack gun violence and those issues that are important to Black mothers, I'm a mother of an 8-year-old boy, and I'll be having that talk with him soon one day. If we want to create jobs, people need access to opportunity. You can't do that without revenue. He knows you need intergovernmental cooperation. And so what he just described for you is that you can't be a purist and think that your way is the only way. You've got to be willing to work with people. And that is what I hope she will use as her message, that vote matters, because that politics is supposed to translate into resources for our community. And guess what? If it doesn't, it's bad politics.
Nick.
I would what I would say to a female breadwinner to get them to encourage other people to vote is that this election could very well determine the trajectory of female breadwinners in this country, right? Because we're choosing between a president who only cares about his own narrow interest and about the interests of billionaires, and a president who actually wants to chart a better path for everyday working people. And I think most female breadwinners fall in that latter category. So we need a president who's going to be thinking about a housing policy. Biden is in his platform thinking about making Section 8 vouchers an entitlement, so that everyone can have housing. That's important to female breadwinners. They're the ones who most often get evicted. Biden supports raising the minimum wage. He supports better access and cheaper access to healthcare and childcare. He supports helping Americans to pay down their student debt. All of those things are going to be critical to a female breadwinner's ability to have social mobility. I also think that we have a really great opportunity with his VP pick, right? The reason why Black women were excited about having a Black vice president, yes, for the representation, but also for what we feel that will mean for the agenda, right? And so I think that there's an opportunity for Kamala Harris to bring her experience to this platform. She was really strong on pay equity during the presidential race. I would love to see Biden adopt some of her agenda items in that area. And so I just wanted to throw that out as another opportunity here that can really benefit women.
Councilmember Gilmore-Richardson.
Yes, and I too have to agree, because I think it's important that we understand that when women are at the table, better decisions are made, and all the issues that we care about in our local communities are on the ballot for this upcoming election. And I wanted to go back to something that our majority leader mentioned about how we get things done, and how Vice President Biden notated that he knows he's not the end all be all, but that it's important that we have bipartisanship. It's important that we honor our democracy and have stability in our conversations and in our discussions, and that he understands that when you are getting things done, that you have no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. So we have to ensure that we talk about those key issues with the women in our community, but also think about how women have been the backbone of all of these movements for so long. I mean, it can't be lost on us that this year is the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. And we know that for African-American women, our opportunity came a lot later. So we have to talk about how we have to exercise our power and use our power in the ballot box so that we can get the issues that are most important to us addressed in our local community. So that's what I would say to a female breadwinner, because we need the issues that we care about most addressed after this election.
And Councilmember at Large Brooks.
Yeah, so I am a female breadwinner of my family. And what I would like to say is that everything in our community is political. I want to talk to those swing voters, like folks that aren't excited about voting, like women that are working 2 and 3 jobs, some of them at hospitals and nursing homes, that are healthcare workers that feel like this fight isn't for them. You know, we have to remind those female breadwinners that every decision we make in our life and everything and every opportunity that we want for our children is on the line. Right now, this vote talks about simple stuff like street lights in our neighborhoods. Do we have quality education for our kids? You know, can we afford healthcare? This is what I would tell them. It's all political, and that's why we all need to get a part of this voting system. I think that we have to continue to emphasize the need for voting, the need for every one of our votes to matter. And that includes our female breadwinners. We have to take our blinders off. And our Councilman Gilmore Richardson said, I'm gonna mess it up, but like, it's no forever enemies. This is not a forever fight. Our fight right now is for freedom and Black liberation. It's for freedom of our kids. It's for freedom for our futures. That's why it's important that we vote. Vote now, vote early, vote for 2020.
Well, listen, ladies, we are winding down, have reached our time limit. I want to make sure that I get in an announcement for everyone who is watching. You are invited to join Kiwana J. McKinney next Thursday for a virtual meeting. It's called The Tea for Female Breadwinners, Empowering Self, Families, and Communities During Times Like This. You can actually reach Kiwana at 267-934-4298 for more information. Again, I'm going to run that number back for you, 267-934-4298. We have it up on the screen, so if you want to screenshot it, do whatever you need to do, please do. And I'll also make sure we get that in the comment section for folks so that you have that. Okay, so now that we got that out the way, and this has been an honor to soak in all that each of you has laid out, not in just what we see happening on a national stage with the presidential election, but what we're living through every day right here in the city of Philadelphia, and what each of you are doing to bring about a change, not just in your district, but for our people, for our families. So just salute to each and every one of you. And yes, I want to formally say thank you to Councilwoman at Large Catherine Gilmore Richardson, Councilmember at Large Kendra Brooks, and 3rd District Councilmember Jamie Gauthier. And with that said, it has been an absolute pleasure to moderate this conversation. And I'm turning it over to Boss Lady, okay? The one and only Councilwoman Cherelle Parker.
Hey, listen, I want to take this opportunity to say a special thank you to my colleagues, Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson, Councilwoman Jamie Gauthier, and Councilwoman Kendra Brooks. I hope you all see that we've got the cream of the crop in City Council. We are not a monolith. Many of us have the same goals, but the paths and the routes that we choose to get there may be a little different. But what you saw today was the breath and the depth of some sisters in your Philadelphia City Council. And I hope that you were proud. We are on the right track, and our job is to keep pushing forward so that we can build back better for all Philadelphians. I am proud to call each of you my colleagues. I thank you for your service and your leadership. And guess what I also do? I thank you guys for saying yes, because y'all know me, I'm not fluffy. And I watch how people respond when you call them. I said, let me see if they're going to, come and they're going to help out here. So thank you for sharing some of you. To our moderator, Philadelphia's own Sincerely Sarita, you are keeping our people informed, and we value you and we appreciate you and your work. So we want to thank you, Sister Sarita. We also want to say a very, very special thank you to my new Philly team, Zach, Kelly, and Ebony, for organizing this event and helping us to stay connected to our constituents. Now, I know that Sarita said it. I just need to say to my sister Kiwana McKinney, I will be there for the virtual meeting. The Tea for the Female Breadwinners, Empowering Self, Families, and Communities During Times Like This. Cherelle Parker is going to be in the house key, so I'm RSVPing right now. Don't tell me I have to call you. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We want you to remember to vote early, vote on election day, but the message is to vote. We want you to remember what's at stake. Healthcare is on the ballot. Our right to vote is on the ballot. Education is on the ballot. Clean air is on the ballot. Immigration rights are on the ballot. Equity is on the ballot. Unconstitutional stop and frisk is on the ballot. There is so much more at stake. We can't afford to sit this one out. Let our voices be heard. We hope you will vote Biden-Harris. Our future depends on it and your vote. I'm also want to encourage you, and please do this for Cherelle Parker. If you didn't get the link today, please promise me that you will go get the plan. If anybody wants to tell you about what's not included in the plan, say, before I have a conversation with you, I want to know if you've done your homework. I want to know what's in this plan for Black people. Tell them to read it. And after they read it, if you want to debate that we need more of some of this, less of some of that, I'll have that discussion. But don't tell me what's not there being offered by the team until you've actually read the plan. I finally want to close with this. I too am excited about Sister Kamala Harris making history, standing on the shoulders of Shirley Chisholm, Barbara Jordan, and all of the other courageous women who laid the ground for her to walk on. But when our sister Kamala Harris was in Philadelphia, our Backyard Chronicles, and part of the reason why we wanted these three colleagues to be with us is because they have a connection to the Backyard Chronicles now, and they can't tell you about it because what happens in the backyard stays in the backyard. But one of the things that we told her, and we said publicly, we are excited about the history-making opportunity that she has, but it's not just because we have a complexion connection. We're excited about her because she's prepared. So if it's the Situation Room, the Cabinet Room, or any room, we know that she's going to be prepared when she gets there. To my colleagues, thank you, sisters. You two are prepared, and I'm honored to serve with you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Leader Parker. This is great.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Sarita. Great job.
Thanks, Sarita.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.